Good morning, Brokebot Nation. This is Remi in the AM, and we are waking the fuck up. So get that coffee flowing, tap that morphine drip, and wipe last night's eyeliner off your face because it's Sunday, bitches, and that means I don't have to work tomorrow. It is Sunday, like I said, March 10th. It's windy as fuck, and I'm up an hour earlier than I really want to be. The clocks were moved forward this morning, and thanks to my last phone that didn't update with the rest of the world last year and the year before that, I was stupid late for work that year. So this time I got a little paranoid and kept checking my phone like every few hours last night. So I may not be as awake as I would be if government hadn't decided to set clocks forward for like very little reason. Anywho, how are you all doing today, this morning? And guys, I want to be clear. This is interactive. So if you have something you want to talk about, or have thoughts or want to vent in the morning, message me. I might have the ability to give you a number to call in so you can actually talk with me for the show. But like I said, just message me if there's something you want to talk about and we will hit on top of it. The only decent way to move a day along to me is to laugh at the dumb shit. And I'm not meaning that I'm the dumb shit, but there's sometimes. I did also want to mention I'm trying to figure out, and when I say I'm trying to figure out, it means I haven't gotten too far in this process. But I'm trying to figure out how to include music in my episode. And no joke, as I was recording this like a few minutes ago, I had just finished uploading the other episode from yesterday. And like not even half an hour after uploading it, it got flagged with the music I had put into it. So I was pretty upset about that. So I need to figure out how to go about putting music into the show without running into a copyright problem. And so I started looking stuff up to try to figure it out. And like all the videos I was watching that touch base on it were like, don't, just don't. But I really want to know how other videos on YouTube, like Musical Autopsy, I highly doubt he went through and got the copyright for all those songs that he did and used in his videos, or like people that just have videos with music up with lyric. Like I'm not following this process. So I need to figure it out. If you guys have thoughts on what I need to do, let me know. Because what I want to do is feature like J-pop music, anime intros and outros, maybe some K-pop here and there. I want to just kind of include some music into it so it gives it a little bit more something. um, so today's topic that I'm touching on is manga versus comic books, American comic books to be specific. I don't know if there's anything like European comic books. I didn't look into that, but I don't I don't know. I mean like technically it kind of is a European comic book because a lot of Americans were Europeans that came over, and I mean, yeah. Anywho, first point that I was contemplating making. Well, let's back up here. Um, so to make this a little bit easier, let's go with American superheroes in comic books and Japanese superheroes in comic books, because it'll lend well to one of the points I was going to make. But comic books are usually shorter when it comes to the individual book in comparison to manga, where you're looking at something along the lines of like max 30 pages in a comic book, whereas a manga you're looking at around 180 to 200. Um, and that's very little filler when it comes to a manga, whereas comic books tend to have those ads and the unnecessary in it. I mean, you'll find that stuff in a manga magazine, like Shonen Jump, but not so much in the manga itself. They may do something like all the way at the end of it, or like, oh, what is her name? She did Absolute Boyfriend. She did a few of my favorite ones. Fushi Yugi, I think she did too. Now I'm gonna have to look this up. But if I'm not mistaken, she would put little side conversations into her panels, which isn't really detouring this from the story as much as like a blatant ad in a comic book is. And when you get down to the nitty gritty, like take out all those advertisements in a comic book, and you're left with a shit ton less than 30, which has always been something very agitating to me. So, like, I would go to the comic book store, and granted, they're not as expensive as a manga, but spending even just like, let's say, $7 on a comic book that only has like less than 10 pages is a little infuriating. Like, it's like, okay, well, fuck. Do I really want to buy this? Or do I want to buy an 180 graphic novel? Like, not like $180, but like 180 pages graphic novel. So that's usually that what gets me as to why I don't have a ton of comic books. Because I can't. I'm a very frugal person, and frugal is a nice word choice for I'm really fucking cheap. And I hate spending money on something that is just kind of meh. I can live without it. Like, if I can read it there, I'm gonna read it there and just move on. Like, there was one comic book, I don't remember the name of it. It was just a random one I grabbed. That was really cool. I really liked it. It had like 7 pages in it. It fucking went nowhere. Like, nowhere. And it drove me absolutely up a damn wall. But in the regards to, oh, that's what I was looking up. I was looking up who wrote that. Absolute Boyfriend. Oh, are they making an anime of Absolute Boyfriend? Guys! Guys! South Korea making a television series of Absolute Boyfriend. But right now, we're looking up manga. We'll just have to come back to that. Oh, I loved this. Aha! You ought to say. There we go. Figured it out. So, she also did Alice 19th, if I'm not mistaken. Her art style is very, her. And I enjoy her work a lot. It's usually super cutesy, super codependent on the male in it, but it's super cutesy, and I always loved her work. But anywho, she, if I'm not mistaken, has that sidebar where she has the ability to just kind of talk with the reader, tell a little bit more about her process or whatever's going on with the character. So I really like that, and I feel like it's not something you find as much in comic books. I could be wrong and just haven't seen a comic book with that little side panel. But that brings me to my next thought, is that comic books, they have a little bit more room with stylizing for character-wise, and like coloring. And for example, there is a debate, and this is jumping the boat over to anime for a minute. There is a debate on whether or not Avatar: The Last Airbender is really considered anime, or if it's considered a cartoon. But they also have a comic version out of it, or a graphic novel, whichever you want to refer to it as. I think it sits in a very gray zone, but I do think it is more of a cartoon and more of a comic. That borrows traits of mangas and traits of anime. But I feel like the American comic or American cartoon has a little bit more room to do as they please. So you can end up with many different styles of art. Whereas, yes, with anime and manga, you can have different styles of art, but if you stray too far from that style, I feel like you're going to get a lot more backlash. And there's one I'm thinking of in particular, but here's a good example. So I've mentioned it before. Inuyasha is my favorite. Like it's my first anime, so it's like my heart and soul sort of thing. When I was first reading the manga, it was very Inuyasha. It was very stylized. And then once they started becoming more popular, or once like the 2000s hit, they started producing the final act, I probably want to say, is what it was that I was reading. But anywho, they revamped them and they put colored pages in there, and the pages were thicker, and it was the style that was in the anime. It was weird, and I don't think it did as well as the original, where it was the black and white. It was very much their style. I feel like the fan base for manga and anime doesn't allow for the creator to stray too far from the usual. Even though like you you hear or see a lot of people like, oh well, you have like 90s or 80s anime and manga, and then you have now manga and anime where it's very clean, it's very pretty, it's different from back then, but that's just progress. Whereas you can have a comic book like Aliens, which is very realistic, versus, trying to think offhand here. I don't read as many comic books as I do mangas. And the only thing I can think of is really Venom versus something like a more realistic character. Well, yes, Venom is realistic. They're different styles. I gotta get out of the Marvel world. Actually, Aliens isn't Marvel. But what I'm meaning is that there's more room to do whatever the hell you want as long as it's in a comic book style. For example, my brother is a comic book artist. He's actually the one that did our logo, and his style is different from something that is like a Dark Horse comic book. Dark Horse? I want to say it's Dark Horse. Dark House? Dark Horse. Or DC, for ones that people might know better. But anywho, it's very different, but still acceptable because it's in that comic book style. I have a good version. A comic in a newspaper is still considered a comic, but you have something that's like a comic book where it's still considered kind of in the same realm. Although I'm pretty sure any comic book person would argue that fact with me because it's kind of like comparing a cartoon to an anime again. But I still think that comic books have a little bit more room for stylizing than what the audience of a manga would allow. And I'm in that category. I'm the type that if you color my pages of my manga, I am far less likely to read it. Far less likely to read it. I don't like it. It feels weird to me. It feels cheap to me for whatever reason. It bothers me. Beyond that, let's see here. People need to not text me while I'm recording. One other thing that I think is interesting is that when it comes to comic books, you don't find as many slice of life comics. And that's really, I really like slice of life. When I'm just wanting to kind of sit down and read something easygoing, I don't feel like you find that as much in a comic book. Comic books are very geared towards like the action or the drama that's taking place and all that sort of stuff. Whereas you can have something like Your Lie in April where like jack shit happens. I'm not a huge fan of Your Lie in April. Like nothing seems to happen in that one. But you can have one like, let's see here. I am currently looking through the list of all my fucking animes and mangas that I have read. Like, for example, Beastmaster. No, I'm thinking of My Little Monster. No, Beastmaster works too. Both of them basically about a girl that's dating a crazy out of control guy. Like, super simple. About high school. Super simple. You're not really going to see much of that in like a comic book unless you're like looking at what is it? Archie and somebody? Like that old comic book series. But that comic book series is weird. I could never get into it. Like I picked it up several times and it's just like this is I don't like the style of it. It's like how I'm an Imagurian. I like Imager. You can find me on that platform, but you won't find me on Reddit. I don't like Reddit's platform. I don't like its style, and I feel like that's a little bit how I am with that series of comic book for the Archies, is that I don't like its style, and I really struggle with it. But if you guys know of a good slice of life comic that I should read, let me know, and I will read it. But yeah, no, I'm much when it comes to different genres, I feel that manga takes that award. Whereas if you're looking for a comic book with drama, action, superheroes, I mean, comic books have that covered. And I mean, you do have it where Marvel, everything in Marvel's world is in its world. So something that could be happening to Batman could be happening, like, could affect Spider-Man in a different realm. Everything that's happening in the DC world is affecting DC characters. Like, it's all connected, which is kind of cool. A little convoluted, but cool. Whereas a story with a manga is just that story with that manga. Unless you see a crossover from a fanfic or the artist is bored and was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do this shit. Um, or like predominantly fan fiction. You don't see that too often. Which, don't get me wrong, I would be all for that. Like, just all for that. If shows started popping up, if anime started popping up or manga started popping up by mixing worlds, oh, you can best believe that I would buy that series. Like, hell yeah. But that is something you don't see in mangas as much, of the crossing of characters, unless it's fan fiction. So I would say that's a pretty cool thing about the American comic book series, is that they have a tendency to do that. Um, and another thing that I didn't think of this one. It wasn't one that crossed my mind. I did see it pop up. But one person online was talking about character progression and that comic book heroes, so like Superman was their example, they don't have character progression. I was never a Superman fan, so I can't speak too heavily on him. I know his background. I really haven't even seen the Superman movies. I don't know why, but I was never a fan of Superman. But he's been around for a shit long time. Like, they just keep revamping him, although I do think he died at one point. I think there was like a movie where he died. But he didn't ever seem to grow. Superman was just Superman. Like, Superman beats the shit out of people and is a good guy and is pretty much the 1950s version of the all-American good guy. Whereas something like My Hero Academia, All Might starts out shitty. I don't know if Superman starts out shitty. I feel like he doesn't. I feel like he's an orphan that went, holy fucking shit, I've got powers, and became the all-American boy. But All Might starts out as just kind of that loser that has no powers, that just wants to be that superhero, but has to swallow hair for it. I haven't seen all of My Hero Academia, and it seems odd. But going back to my point is that he grows, and he doesn't get revamped every few years. Although My Hero Academia hasn't been out that long. But my point is that a character within a manga evolves. Their character progression gets better, gets worse. They turn into a good guy, they turn into a bad guy. He has developed into something more than what he was at the beginning of this series. Whereas the American comic book hero is a constant. Batman is a little bit, I would say, has a little bit of character. Not even really. He's always still moody. Like they just don't seem to progress much with their character, in my opinion. And I would maybe say that that might be something due to the American mindset. Whereas they want that constant. Like, look at the 1950s, Superman. You want to know that that superhero is there, that they will always be there, that they will always defeat the villain. Nothing else matters. It's just a constant. Batman will always be there. Batman will always try to stop them. Batman will always fuck something up. Batman will always be moody and dark and brooding. Like, that is the constant. The Punisher. Let's see here. My brain is not working today. But either way, I think you get my point, is that I feel like the American public would rather have that constant that is solely dedicated. Captain America. My brain backtracked there. Captain America is a hell of a constant. Just one hell of a running constant. Where, yes, he does go from like that really skinny, puny guy to, oh, hey, I've got muscles and all that shit. But it wasn't like he did it. It was more along the lines, it was forced upon him. And he grew from there. And through that process, he grew into Captain America. And then it kind of stopped there. Like, he's going to save the day. He's going to try his hardest. He's going to be very conservative. He's that light-hearted, haha, funny. And then he grows a beard. Like, it's not... to me, it doesn't seem like he evolves too terribly much. Whereas, for example, in Tokyo Ghoul, the main character goes from being just like a regular human to having... Sorry if you haven't seen this, spoilers. I don't ever worry about spoilers. If you tell me a spoiler, I'm still going to watch it. So I don't quite catch myself when I'm telling people plots and they don't want to know them. So sorry. But he becomes a ghoul, or half ghoul, and really struggles with the idea that he's a half ghoul. But within those 24 episodes, and I know we're talking about manga, but I just want to highlight a character. Within those 24 episodes, he essentially learns to accept it a little bit more throughout it. And then towards the end, oh, hey, well, let's torture him to force him to accept who he is. And you see that change happen, and you see him grow from there. He's not stagnant, where I feel like a lot of American comic book characters are very stagnant. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I see it personally. On top of that, I feel like Japanese comic books, Japanese mangas take longer to finish a scene, which I like and I don't like. And everybody's had that manga or that anime that has just dragged a fight scene or dragged something out to no end, and you don't want to like keep reading, or you don't want to watch it because you're just like, I've been with this for the past like 4 episodes, been with this for the past like 6 chapters, or an entire manga sometimes will just focus like that one book is solely on this one event. And you're sitting there like, oh my freaking god, just get to the point. There's one that does it really bad. Like, I don't remember what anime I was watching, but it just dragged out to no end, and you find yourself just sitting there like, yep, yep, yep. Whereas comic books, I feel, are a little faster paced. They go from point A to point B in a very quick time frame. So it moves along a little bit faster. So I would say that's a good thing. To further the conversation on American comic books versus Japanese manga and a little bit of anime, because that's where my expertise comes in at, I have 17 Legion. Oh, 17 Legion?
17.
17 Legion here with me to add his insights. So say hello.
What's up?
Alright, so your thought process on American versus Japanese.
Japanese manga and American comic is two different aspects in the way they look at things. For instance, the males in American comics tend to look more masculine, rugged, outdoorsy, sort of like the old Wild West, I suppose. You know, beards, scars, stuff like that. While the Japanese manga looks more finessed. Pretty boy, more or less.
I want to argue that fact, but I can't. Like, I'm sitting here trying to think of, like...
Give me an instance.
I'm trying... like, the only ones I can think, like...
I mean, just look at the, here's a good one. Marvel.
Isn't a pretty boy.
Marvel. Look at the original Tony Stark, who is a...
Tony Stark's kind of a pretty boy.
In a sense, however, he is got that rugged look because he is built. Okay, he's got large muscles, very intelligent, bald black man, right?
Wait, what?
The original Tony Stark in Marvel was a black man.
No way.
Yes, look it up.
I'm going to. Hold on.
I hope you still have this recorded too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Original. Can't spell. Tony Stark.
The comic book Tony Stark was a black man. A decent looking, but he was a black man, not a white man.
Are you implying this?
No, go look at other photos.
Original Tony Stark.
Mm-hmm.
In comic books. Comics. Fuck it. I'm just going to type in original black Tony Stark.
Just put images.
Black Tony Stark. Iron Man, Anthony Edward, Tony Stark, is a fictional superhero, blah, blah, blah. Invincible Iron Man. I'm not seeing any black Iron Man. I don't know if I believe your theory. That's not Iron Man. That is what's his nuts. The kitty cat man.
Mm-hmm.
Black Panther. There we go.
The original Iron Man was originally black, way back in the day. And I'm talking about the original comics that Stan Lee.
I'm gonna have to check that shit on you. Like, I'm gonna have to like go through and check it. And I don't know.
But Tony Stark was originally, yes, he's always been supposed to be a pretty boy. However, he's also got that beard. While if you look at the Japanese animation, it's very rarely if you ever see anybody with a beard. They're usually young, early 20s, late teenage males, no beard and very little facial hair.
But I feel like if that's like if you're looking at there's a name for the I recently came across the name of this type of anime, and I know I'm probably gonna mispronounce it, but it's something like seinen or sien. Like, it's the mature anime. That's not like, it's not hentai, but it's for the mature audience.
Right.
Where I feel you'll find more facial hair on those or more rugged characters, but at the same time, it's not exactly like the built and ripped grrr.
Right.
Toxic
but you also have to
masculinity.
look at is this detail in characters in the American are more rigid details compared to the real refined details in the Japanese.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that. I mean, I can definitely say that all my favorite male leads or villains, I'm a villain person, are definitely pretty feminine. Like Sesshomaru from Inuyasha. Like, he's a pretty aggressive, like, domineering villain. Or even Naraku.
Right.
Both
However, they
feminine.
do have the soft tone features in their, whether it's facial or body structure. It's not as rugged. It's refined.
Now, would you say that that would make them more of a villain than the, like, so like in the villain aspect, would you say that that more feminine features makes more of a psychopath villain than what it would be where in America, if you have a villain, he's obviously uglier looking or more grrr or
Not necessarily. I think that the difference between the two is that with the Japanese, they have more of a finesse way of drawing their villains. Is it gives them a different appearance, and it gives it a different twist to what the character really is. Because when you look at the American comics, you can tell right away, oh, he's a villain, because just by the way he looks, majority of the time, not always, but majority of the time. For instance, look at Joker from DC, or even Two-Face.
right.
Or if you look at Marvel, you could look at the
like
anti-hero Venom. You know,
they
you
have
can tell
that-
that have that aspect.
Right.
However, when you look at some of the villains in Japanese manga, like Sesshomaru or Naraku and stuff like that, they have you can't really tell right off the bat. They because they can easily twist it around. Okay, they look rather sophisticated, educated. Nobility is the best way to describe it. And when all of a sudden they turn around and just slaughter somebody out of the blue, you're like, holy hell, what just happened? You know,
I would say that's a commentary on our countries, though, as to what we view as evil.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting.
Oh, definitely. But there's also a big difference too. You look at Japanese culture. They're real big into their history and where it's came from, like the era of the samurai and the shogun and stuff like that. They've had all this nobility, and even though that was hundreds of years ago, they still carry that tradition to today's modern Japan, and it's a very respectable culture. I think it's one of the greatest cultures out there. I respect it and love it very much, and I always want to further indulge myself into that, and they keep that culture within a lot of their animes too, and that I'd say heightens my curiosity into a lot of their anime, whether it's manga, anime, and stuff like that.
So Ninja Scroll and what is it? Berserk.
Yes.
More rugged looking characters.
They are.
I would say that now, like in 2019, you're seeing a lot more of those feminine characters from like the 2000s to now.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the emergence of those feminine characters was heavy, but from the 90s back, I would say that you had more of those rugged
Well, like in the movie
characters.
Akira as well, is a
Right.
lot more rugged. I think for a while they did take a lot of
Inspiration from
their
like America.
absolutely. I honestly do believe that. However, I honestly believe that the American culture has taken a lot more of their inspiration from the Japanese manga and anime.
I would definitely say that. I mean, you like I had talked earlier about um, Avatar: The Last Airbender,
Mm-hmm.
whereas a lot of people will consider it anime. I do not consider it anime. It is a cartoon and it is a comic to me because it borrows, I feel, from the anime culture
Mm-hmm.
and from Japanese culture, but it's not in that realm for me. It's in like a gray zone
Mm-hmm.
of they tried to be similar to it, but it's still to me a cartoon, still to me a comic book.
Avatar is definitely a cartoon. It was originally implemented by Nickelodeon and stuff like that. But yes, there's a different aspect between cartoons and anime, regardless if it's American anime or Japanese anime and stuff like that. Japanese anime is more refined. American anime is more rugged. However, cartoons are not say refined. They're more um, softer. They have a softer appearance, so that way you can have more audience around it.
Right.
It's pertaining more towards younger generations, like my children have a 7-year-old and a
Mm-hmm.
15-year-old. It's more towards my younger for my 7-year-old, like Avatar's Last Airbender.
See, I wouldn't put that in
Transformers, the
there.
original Transformers, more towards my 7-year-old.
See, I would argue that Avatar: The Last Airbender, while they tried to be geared towards kids, I don't think they were geared towards kids. Did you watch Korra?
I have not watched Korra. I did watch the original with
Watch
Aang.
Korra. It is not geared for kids at all. But I feel like
Different
Angst
writer.
did. I'm not 100% sure if it's a different writer, but they went a lot more dark. Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot, like really dark. Like I watched it when I was like 20, 21, and my boyfriend and I sat there at the time just like staring at like, oh
Mm-hmm.
god, you guys went dark. Like all right, but like they started doing that at the end of the last Airbender.
Mm-hmm.
Like they started perpetually getting more dark and more dark and more dark. So I would say that I feel it's more geared towards the teenage years.
Okay.
But at the same time, um, cartoons I feel are a little bit more subjective.
To younger children.
Mm-hmm.
While animes more towards early teens and teenagers.
Yeah, I can see that.
To
Adults.
adults. Okay. Whether it's American or Japanese, or even the Chinese
I would
anime.
say comic books are on that same level. I wouldn't let my son pick up any old comic book and be
Mm-mm.
like, yeah, I'm gonna read this. No, let's not
No,
read The Punisher.
no,
Like,
definitely not. Or even one of my favorites, Pitt. Pitt. It's one of my favorite comics. It's from the 90s. Okay,
mm-hmm.
they don't make it anymore. It's very rare and stuff. It is uh, very graphic and bloody.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of the bloodiest and goriest comics I've read. But I was a teenager when I had it, and I really enjoyed it. And I had the first and second edition or copies of the comics. But that one is extremely graphic. I mean, he rips dude's heads off. Dude looks like Venom is the best way to describe him. Oversized, very muscular, very powerful, like the Hulk and stuff like that. Um, but it's nothing like if you were reading Hulk. Okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
nowhere. It's much more graphic. It's nowhere near as say
Who produced it?
Teenage Attuned. I can't think of it right now. I would have to look it up. It's been many, many years. Um, but I can go either way. I've read American comics. Like I said, my favorite's Pitt. I've read some of the the manga. The manga is a lot of detailed, and those are books,
Mm-hmm.
novels, rather than, well, American are comic books, or 50 pages long at most. While you look at a Japanese manga, it's
180
180 at
is
least.
usually their average.
Exactly. And then you got a full series of like 20 books at 180
Right.
plus each. While you look at Americans, they'll have five, six, 700 comics for a series, but they're only 50 pages long.
Right.
And you gotta wait for so long just to be able to get the next copy.
And see, I can't do like I can justify spending like my $10-11 on like one manga. I can't justify like the $7 to $10 on like the short comic books where it's like, son of a bitch, like I'm already done with it and I don't have the next installment, so now I have to
until the
wait
next
around.
month.
Right. It's to me infuriating. So that's kind of why I deviated away from comic books. Did you seriously just brush your beard?
You're damn right I do.
It ain't that long to be sitting here brushing.
It's long enough, because otherwise they'll start curling up into my skin and everything. But it's definitely long enough. It's a quarter of an inch.
You're so proud of your beard.
You're damn right I am.
Well, thank you for your thoughts. And do you have any closing thoughts on the concept of American versus Japanese?
Yeah, my closing thoughts are: have fun, enjoy your reading.
American comic books are very more socially acceptable, too, which draws back to my comment yesterday about how liking manga and liking anime isn't very acceptable, but liking comic books is more accepted than liking manga, which is infuriating. It's more acceptable for a girl who would know nothing about a comic book series to dress up as that comic book character and run around and say I like comic books because nerdy is cool, right? But only to a certain degree of nerdy. The minute you are cosplaying, there's a stigma attached to it, and that's some motherfucking bullshit. It makes me so mad. Um, but like a girl holding a controller in her mouth while she's in some sort of sexy pose, for, oh, I'm a gamer nerd or I'm a gamer geek, and it's like, no, you're a whore. There's a difference. Like, just admit it, and I'm more okay with looking at your picture as a whore than. And I say that in a loving term, guys. I'm not being mean. I'm not being a bitch. I'm saying like you're whoring yourself out. Like it's what it is. You are not into this industry. You are not a gamer. And so you're pretending to be something just for the likes, the views, the paycheck, whatever it may be. It's not real, but it's more accepted. Not by gamers. Gamers get pretty pissy about that though. But it's more accepted than if, like, for example, a cute girl who was completely into what she was doing, or to pose with a body pillow that has, like, a character on it. She's considered weird. Um, Even in the Japanese culture, if I'm not mistaken. What is it, otaku? I think it's considered a kind of a not the best term in Japan, but here it's not the most hated term. Um, it's more of a endearing term, in my opinion. I could be wrong on that. Once again, if you don't agree with something I say, message me, fight me, come at me, bro, come at me, brah. Um, but yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on it. If you, like I said, if you don't agree with me on something, message me. Also, if you know how I can get around the copyright problem, I will play music on my morning podcast, and introduce you guys to some new music. But I have to get around that stupid fucking copyright problem. which, like I said, let me know if you have any thoughts. Beyond that, Cake and I will be meeting on Tuesday to record. We're super excited about the fact that we did find a recording studio. So hopefully within the next 5 episodes, like after 5 episodes, the sound quality will be like shit ton better, phenomenal. Um, as of right now, I'm not in a recording studio. I do not have recording equipment. I am super ghettoified and using my phone. So, yeah, so stick with us, guys. And as always, stay tuned, stay cool, and stay loving anime.